Good morning. We are looking today at the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, chapter, perfect timing, chapter 299, Reish Tzadik Tes. So yesterday we learned the Gemara that outlines and gives us like the underpinnings of the Halacha that one may not eat before Havdalah. And we had is, let's say, 3 points from the Gemara, and those 3 points become the legs that support all the halachas we're about to learn. So the 3 points we learned are: number one, that if you started a meal early enough in the day, we'll describe when that is, but you started a meal early enough in the day of Shabbos, then you don't have to stop your meal to make Havdalah. You can keep on going, and Shabbos extends with you in your meal. That's point A. Point B is, if you haven't started a meal yet, and now it's time to make Havdalah, you may not eat anything until you make Havdalah. Point 3 is that when it comes to taking a glass of water before Havdalah, after the time comes, there was a dispute in the Gemara. You had some that said no problem, and others which said, Rav Huna, who said, aren't you worried about this punishment of asphyxiation? That's how bad drinking water, that's how severe drinking water is before Havdalah. So those are the 3 points there. Yeah, that if you start a meal early enough, you may continue. If you haven't started, you may not eat. And with water, there's a dispute. This is where we are. So says the Alter Rebbe like this: Siman Reish Tzadik Tes. It's the first 8 halachas of this chapter, because we'll see. Look at the cover title. Shaloi lechol, just the first page there. Yeah. This chapter will discuss the prohibition against eating or drinking or doing any work before you do Havdalah. So there's 3 items to cover here: no eating or drinking. That we learned about. That's what we're going to cover. And then there's a third element here, which is not to work. Right. So the chapter is divided into 2, really, in terms of discussing first no eating or drinking before Havdalah. That's going to be our topic, which is Halacha 1 through 7 or 8. We'll learn that. And then the second half, some of it gets to if you didn't make Havdalah on Saturday night, how can you make Havdalah on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? That's going to come up also in this chapter, which we'll get to in the Gemara first, and we'll come back to this chapter. And then afterwards, this chapter discusses the laws of not doing any work until you actually make Havdalah, and we'll cover that as well when we get there.
Still not clear about the Shalosh Seudos.
Okay, we're going to get there now. We're going to get there now. Okay, so let's see. Halacha Aleph. Asur Chachamim, our sages forbade, Lechol Shum Davar, the front, just the first page. Aleph, where it says 1. Yeah. Asur Chachamim, our sages forbade Lechol Shum Davar, to eat anything, or Lishto Shum Mashke, or to drink anything, Chutz Mimayim, with the exception of water. So we're allowing you to drink water. We're not taking Rav Huna's severe position. We're taking Abaye's position, that Rav Ashi's position, right? The people in the house of Rav Ashi, they weren't concerned with water. You may drink water, but everything else you may not. The Motzei Shabbos, when Shabbos is out, until you make Havdalah holding the cup of wine, even though you already made Havdalah in your prayer. So which means, make this clear, Shabbos is over already for you. You've already declared Shabbos is over because you davened Ma'ariv, and in Ma'ariv, in the fourth bracha, Atachan and Panu, you added that paragraph in which you declare the distinction between Shabbos and Yom Tov, and Shabbos and weekday. So you already made Havdalah in your prayer. Havdalah meaning a declaration of separation, and thanking Hashem, separating between, so Shabbos is over, right? But you still may not eat or drink because you have another obligation, right? We explained this yesterday. The halacha is, as soon as a time comes that brings with it an obligation, you may not eat or drink until you fulfill that obligation, right? You wake up in the morning, Sukkot, you may not eat or drink until you shake the lulav nesek. You wake up in the morning, Rosh Hashanah, you may not eat or drink until you blow the shofar. Because as soon as an obligation hits you, you may not do any, or Kiddush, you may not eat or drink until you fulfill that obligation. So even though I already made Havdalah in my Ma'ariv, so Shabbos is over, nonetheless, I may not eat or drink until I make Havdalah in the cup, because that obligation is still upon me. Yeah? We're going to get, okay, so now 1 second. Okay, with the exception of water, you may drink some water. Now, even tasting a little bit is forbidden. For reasons explained in section chapter 271. So if you look at the footnote 5, I'm reading, in that source, the Alter Rebbe explains that our sages ruled more stringently with regard to Kiddush and Havdalah, because primarily the mitzvah is to be fulfilled at the very beginning of its time frame, i.e., close to the commencements of Shabbos and close to its departure, right? You're supposed to do those mitzvahs as soon as Shabbos starts or as soon as Shabbos ends, and therefore you may not eat or drink until you've done your obligation. Okay, now what did he say here? He said the essential prohibition is from the sages is not to eat or drink on Motzei Shabbos, when Shabbos is out. But when is Shabbos out?
In between Shabbos and in between that point and
When is Shabbos out?
Sunset.
When you did Abdullah.
No, once Abdullah is out, once Shabbos is out, you now have an obligation for Abdullah. Forget Ma'ariv or anything, right? He's saying even if you did Ma'ariv, but let's say you didn't do Ma'ariv, whatever. But the second Shabbos is out, the obligation to make Abdullah is upon you. No eating or drinking until you've done your obligation, right? But when is Shabbos out? At nightfall. But nonetheless, there's a period before nightfall, Bein Hashmoshes period, which is the doubt: is it night or is it day? There's a halachic inherent doubt. From sunset until nightfall, it's usually about a half an hour, somewhere between, depending on what time of year, somewhere between half an hour, 40 minutes, and sometimes even a full hour, almost an hour. Right? In the summertime, it's longer. In the wintertime, it's shorter. But that period is an inherent doubt. Is the beginning of the next day, the beginning of night, or is it the end of the previous day? So we take the stringent view, namely, when Shabbos starts, we start Shabbos before Bein Hashmoshes. Bein Hashmoshes means like between the times, right? Between like the sun setting. So when Shabbos starts, we begin it early. When Shabbos ends, we wait till the end. Right? Okay, so keeping that in mind, when should you stop eating? Or when does the prohibition against eating start? Really, it starts when the obligation for Havdalah begins. But the moment of when your obligation for Havdalah begins is a doubt. We take the more stringent view and make Havdalah only after Bein Hashmoshes is over. But really, the moment Bein Hashmoshes starts, maybe you should make Havdalah now, because maybe Shabbos is over, which means that whole time period, you may not eat. So your answer for Shalosh Seudos is you have to start eating before Bein Hashmoshes.
Meaning before sunset.
Before the sunset. Even though you're not making Havdalah until after Bein Hashmoshes, but hypothetically, your obligation to make Havdalah, at least in doubt, begins the moment Bein Hashmoshes begins. And taking the stricter view, taking the stricter view, you may not start eating before Bein Hashmoshes, even though you're not making Havdalah until after Bein Hashmoshes is over, till sunset. Till sundown. Correct, yeah.
But on one end, it's important to do the mitzvah like as soon as you can.
Yeah.
On the other end, it's you want to drag it along to like honor the Shabbat and not rush it out.
Right.
So
Okay.
it contradicts itself.
That's a good point. So you want to extend Shabbos, but you can't do, when you're extending Shabbos, you can't take like personal pleasure in the place of an obligation, which is making Havdalah. It is a little bit like two like contradictory principles that we're trying to sustain here.
The other thing about when you do Havdalah,
Yeah.
you do it in the kahanas and all that we learned.
In what?
Yaknas and all that.
Yeah.
You do Havdalah at the end because you don't want to rush.
You want
it
it? That's
out.
right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So pushing Havdalah is a thing,
But you're not supposed to.
but you can't eat or drink because you're giving preference to your own pleasure over the obligation. But if you started a meal earlier, okay, we'll get to it.
So for
Okay,
me-
halacha base. So that, yeah.
For me, the best time is, if I want to be safe, let's say half hour at the most after Mara.
Okay, so the way to think about it, to be talking about when to eat,
Yeah.
make
No,
Havdalah
to do with Havdalah.
right after Ma'ariv. No, Ma'ariv we wait anyway till the end of Bein Hashmoshes for Ma'ariv. So as soon as Ma'ariv is done, you can make Havdalah, no problem. Yeah, but you shouldn't eat between the hour, because it's possible that your obligation for Havdalah already began, considering that there's a doubt as to when Shabbos is out, really. Yeah, okay. But we take the more stringent view on both ends. We take the more stringent view by not eating from when Bein Hashmoshes starts, which is the earliest point at which hypothetically Havdalah could be done. But yet we don't actually make Havdalah till the latest point when Havdalah could be done, because maybe it's still Shabbos, because we're in a doubt period. We take the stringent view on Shabbos and the stringent view against eating. Yeah, and that's what halacha. That's the halacha base here. Halacha 2, which is the second page there. Yeah, okay, good. Even if you were eating and drinking while it was still day, which means before Bein Hashmoshes, before this time, you have to stop eating as soon as the Bein Hashmoshes starts. No, what it says.
Grab that up.
Vafilu hayoshev v'shoiseh. I'm sorry, I said eating. My apologies. The halacha opens up again. Vafilu hayoshev v'shoiseh b'bayjam. Even if he was sitting and drinking, he was drinking before Ben Hashmashis while it was still daytime. Tzarich lahafsik, he has to stop. Kishmagia Ben Hashmashis, when Ben Hashmashis arrives, she speak Laila because it's a doubt. Maybe it's night already. Continues. Aval bat im hayoshev v'oichem b'bayjam. If he was sitting and eating before the day starts, before the night ends, before the night starts, while it's before Ben Hashmashis, so it's definitely daytime. As an afilu kishmagia vaday laila, even though it becomes absolute night, so Ben Hashmashis is over. Verashai lahamshich. Sorry, I'm skipping a line here again. If he was sitting and eating while it was still day before Ben Hashmashis, he doesn't have to stop his meal. Afilu mishtia, even though he's drinking. Meaning to say like this: if you're only drinking, then when Ben Hashmashis comes, stop. If you're eating, then you can keep on eating, and your drinking is considered part of your eating meal, and you can keep on drinking too.
It's funny because it's on one hand,
The Gemara didn't say it explicitly; it comes from Taisus.
There's leniency for liquid, but then there's also a leniency for water. It's funny.
Right. On the one hand, drinking isn't permanent enough to make as if you can continue your meal.
Right.
On the other hand, water is so temporary that take a glass of water, we don't care. But if you're sitting down, let's say for a glass of wine, then you'd have to stop when Ben Hashmashis comes. But if you're eating a meal and in your meal you're drinking wine, you can keep on eating your meal and continue drinking your wine. That is only if your meal started before Ben Hashmashis, which is again for the point of Shalosh Seudos. You have to make sure the people who eat Shalosh Seudos have to make sure to wash prior to Ben Hashmashis.
So basically, we're making a dollar on the Sunday morning.
Why? If you sat and ate all night.
Oh.
Why are you making a loss in the morning?
Because Shabbos is already finished.
Okay. Oh, well,
Tomorrow.
yeah, by halachic standards, Sunday starts on Saturday night. Yeah. Not what we call Sunday morning.
No.
But what halacha calls the beginning of Sunday. Yes, correct.
So you said you should wash before
Ben Hashmashis.
Before
Shkia.
So then when they say meal here, they're talking about a motzei.
Okay, that's a good question. What does it mean, a meal? Yeah, that's a good question.
Seems like that's what the practice is.
It seems like you have to wash for a meal,
That's what it seems
but although he doesn't say so. So
I've heard from people.
yeah, so in the footnote 8, he says, i.e., the Alter Rebbe is speaking about a situation where a person or persons sat down to eat a proper meal, then ceased eating but continued to sit and drink. But the meal started before. What does a proper meal mean? Presumably it means
Washing.
that he washed. Okay, so let's see. So now let's continue.
Because I know, like,
Sorry?
I'm do this. See, I wash once.
Others don't.
Most don't.
In Chabad we don't wash, yeah.
Right. So, but there are people who snack on like
We'll get in a second.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so now again, the second paragraph of Beis. If he sat and ate prior to while it's still day, before Ben Hashmashis begins, and it's tzarich lahafsik, he doesn't have to stop, afilu mishtia, even from his drinking. Because his meal began, and his drinking is now part and parcel of his meal, he can keep on eating and even keep on drinking. Afilu kishimagia vaday laila, even when absolute night comes. So Ben Hashmashis is over. He's been sitting and drinking for the whole Ben Hashmashis, for the whole hour. If FARBRENGEN continued, he may continue, and Shabbos extends with him. Right? He's permitted, he may continue eating his meal as much as he wants into the night. Because he began while it was permissible. Began before day started. Before night began, even on the doubt night. He started while it was still absolute day, before Ben Hashmashis. Okay. Sorry? Yeah.
That also includes wine. You know how wine can sometimes be true.
It's only wine if it's with his actual meal of eating, right? Not if he just sat down to drink wine. If he sat down to drink wine, you have to stop. But if he's drinking wine within his meal, he can continue drinking his wine. And the point he said in the footnote there is that even if you stopped eating, because that eating and drinking began permissively, you may continue. Right? So the whole reason why I'm allowed to continue eating into the night after Shabbos is because I began
Why?
permissibly. I began with permission from the halacha, and if I don't have to stop. But what if I didn't begin with the halacha's permission? If I forgot and I began to eat before Havdalah, so I didn't begin permissibly, I began mistakenly without permission. Right? Tahainu, what does it mean? If I sat down to eat once this Ben Hashmashas period began, once the sun set. So it's too early for Havdalah because I have to wait for the end of Ben Hashmashas when it's actual night. But hypothetically, it could have been Havdalah's time, and if I'm allowed to eat now. But I did because I forgot. So now it's tzarich lahafsik miyad jenisker. You have to stop eating as soon as you remember. Because the only reason why that other guy was allowed to continue his meal way into the night is because he began permissibly before Ben Hashmashas while it was still day. But this guy began at a point when he was not allowed to, but he just forgot. So you don't get that carte blanche, just continue. Stop.
It's very weird. Usually it's like time stops for this halacha. Because usually the whole point is that a holiday comes in, you have to stop everything you're doing. It doesn't matter if you started doing it before the holiday came
Right.
in.
So that was the thought process that the Gemara introduced at the beginning. The Gemara said, just like you have to stop everything and make Kiddush, maybe you have to stop everything and make Havdalah. That was the Gemara's thinking yesterday. To which they responded by saying, no, Havdalah, we don't have to stop to make Havdalah because you can extend your Shabbos. So long as you began your meal permissibly, which means you began your meal before Ben Hashmashas, before sunset.
This is an outgrowth of that whole dialogue.
That's correct. That's correct. This is the halachic formulation of the whole discussion. That's correct. Now he says, and to your point, the yesh matirim, there are those that permit afilu lahaskil ben hashmashas, that you may start eating ben hashmashas. Right? Bein lechel, whether you're eating, bein lishis, whether you're drinking. The ein isser, and there's no prohibition, ela b'vadei laila, only when it's absolute night, which is when you are allowed to actually make Havdalah. So let's get this clear. There's two opinions, right? The essential prohibition that he defined in Halacha 1. The essential prohibition is when your obligation for Havdalah comes, you may not eat. That's the essence of the prohibition. The dispute here is,
We don't know.
when is your point for Havdalah?
That's the whole
So, correct. So the first view is, as soon as there's a hypothetical obligation for Havdalah, you may not eat. Now, your hypothetical obligation for Havdalah begins at Ben Hashmashas, at sunset, even though you're technically not doing it yet because, hey, maybe it's still day. But hypothetically, your obligation began for no eating from sunset. But the other opinion says, no, this prohibition against eating Havdalah, against eating before you make Havdalah, is only when you have an absolute obligation on Havdalah, which means you could begin your Shalosh Seudos all the way up until night of time. In this view, which would explain why someone might be allowed to
snack on something.
snack during the Shalosh Seudos, even though it's already after Ben Hashmashas, because he'd be relying on this opinion, which this opinion says the prohibition against eating hasn't started yet, because my absolute obligation of Havdalah hasn't started yet. It's the hypothetical obligation of Havdalah started, and this opinion says the prohibition hasn't begun yet. Even though we'll see in a second. Okay, we'll see in a second. Yeah.
That's what we do.
Okay, let's see what we should actually practically do.
We do that on Saturday night.
Sorry.
We do that every Saturday night.
So many rely on that. I try not to, but we'll see in a second.
Observing.
Yes. So there's no reason to stop to jump out of your place and say, "Hey, don't eat." There's an opinion that they can rely on that they may eat during Ben Hashmashas, so long as when it comes to nightfall, absolute nightfall, they stop, which we do because we stop from Ma'ariv Mikabel. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. He continues. And this has become the accepted practice. In these big meals, I'm presuming he's referring to big Ben Hashmashas gatherings. You have to remember that in Hasidic circles, many Hasidic circles, but it seems though this custom began before, but certainly many Hasidic circles, the big gathering with the Rebbe, where the Rebbe teaches Torah, is Shalosh Seudos. Not in Chabad. In Chabad, the FARBRENGENs were by Shabbos lunch. The Rebbe would FARBRENG 1:30 in the afternoon by Shabbos lunch before Mincha. And Malav Malka is a big meal. Chabad doesn't wash for Shalosh Seudos. We wash for Malav Malka. We wash after Ma'ariv for a meal then.
What's the other meal?
Malav Malka.
No, the other one. What?
Shalosh Seudos. Seudas Lishit. Seudas Lishit. Okay, we call it Shalosh Seudos. The Ashkenazim call it Shalosh Seudos, but it's really actually grammatically it's more correct to say Seudas Lishit, which means third meal. Shalosh Seudos means 3 meals.
So that's the
They actually call it daf. Yeah,
sunset.
they actually dafka call it Shalosh Seudos, which is like 3 meals,
Yeah.
because in their view, the third meal incorporates the other 2.
Okay.
spiritually speaking. So they call it Shalosh Seudos. But anyway, so many circles, the big gathering around the Rebbe where he teaches Torah and they sing the Gunim is at this Sudash Lishit, at Shalosh Seudos, after Mincha. And in fact, in many places, they have a room where they don't turn lights on before Shabbos. So when they sit down in that room at Sudash Lishit, after Mincha, it's still a light outside. The light comes in. And as the gathering progresses, it slowly gets darker and darker. And by the time they're done the meal, they're sitting almost in complete darkness and they sing the Gunim and they hear the Rebbe speak Torah. It's a very spiritual experience in many circles. So it seems, I'm imagining that this became the practice there in these circles, in these Hasidic circles. And sometimes it would begin after Ben Hashmoshes. Depending on when you finish Mincha, when everybody sat around a table, it started already after Ben Hashmoshes. Right? It says, you don't have to stop them. Let them be. Because they have an opinion upon which to rely. There's an leniency. There's an opinion which says that the prohibition hasn't started yet. Nonetheless, the primary view is the first view, which is not to start eating once Ben Hashmoshes hits. Which means, in best case scenario, when you come to Shalosh Seudos, don't eat once it's sunset.
Or start
before. If you observe others who are not so stringent and they end up eating after Ben Hashmoshes started, relax, don't say anything, they have an opinion to rely on. There we go. But the Divrei Hakol, everybody agrees, when it comes absolute nighttime, time for Ma'ariv, you have to stop. Even if you sat down for a permanent drinking meal, you sat down for wine. And even eating, you have to stop. If you forgot and started once nighttime began. You have to stop as soon as you remember.
Just like
the only permissibility is if you started before and your meal is continuing. Right? So the way the Alter frames it is not that he doesn't begin this chapter by saying, if you start your meal early, you can keep on going as long as you want. He starts by saying, when Havdalah comes, you may not do anything until you make Havdalah. There's a loophole if you began permissively. That's how he frames it. Yeah.
And then there's a minhag that people even start in.
And then there is the one opinion relying that you can eat between Ben Hashmoshes. Yeah. What did you say?
No.
Wait, okay. Talk.
I was saying they were just reiterating that point. If you started unbeknownst to you that it was already.
That's right. If you forgot, then you have to stop.
They're saying it after nightfall. They're just repeating.
Correct. Yeah. He's saying that he's reiterating what everybody agrees on.
Right.
Even though they argue as to which point the prohibition begins, they all agree on the main principles, which is that if you started when you weren't supposed to, you got to stop as soon as you remember. Now he says, so let's say it's Saturday night. I didn't make Havdalah yet. I washed, I make Hamaitzi, I'm about to take a bite, and I remember I haven't made Havdalah yet. And we just learned the moment you remember, you got to stop your eating. But here, I made a bracha, I didn't eat yet. I can't stop. Right? So he says, take a taste of the bread right away. And then make Havdalah. You can't interrupt your bracha like that. Because if you don't eat bread right away and make Havdalah instead, then the blessing you made of Hamaitzi will become a wasted blessing. And that's a big prohibition. A blessing in vain. We don't want to say God's name in vain, God forbid. So eat a little bread and then make Havdalah. Because if you made Hamaitzi, didn't eat bread, made Havdalah, and wanted to go eat your bread, you'd have to make Hamaitzi again. Because you made this whole interruption between your eating and your taste, your bracha and your tasting. Okay. Now halacha gimel. So this is the framework of the halacha. These are the two opinions, and this is the main principles. Yeah. Now we're going to get to the details of different scenarios and how these principles play out.
So sorry, but when you taste, let's say you washed and then you realized it was nightfall.
Yeah.
So you have a little taste of.
Wait a second. If you washed, and you didn't make hamaitzi, if you washed
you washed
and didn't make hamaitzi yet,
you made hamaitzi.
okay, you made hamaitzi, yeah.
So you taste a little
bread, and then you make Havdalah.
Right, so you don't have, there's no after bracha on there because you didn't eat enough to,
No, and you're continuing your meal after Havdalah anyway.
you're
You'll
no,
continue
you're
eating on Motzei after
continuing-
Havdalah.
all right, you're
Yeah,
continuing.
continue to eat, no
You
problem.
can continue, okay.
Just take-
After Havdalah, continue eating, continue your meal. And when you're done, you make Birkat Hamazon and everything, including on your wine. Right?
Okay, so I just want to get something.
Yeah.
So to be safe,
Yeah.
we do the Shalosh Seudos,
Yeah.
we eat then
When did you start eating?
during the Shalosh Seudos.
Before Ben Hashmashas, though. You should
Yeah,
start
yeah.
before sunset.
Yes, what
Right.
we always do.
Yeah, we usually do, yeah. If
Yeah.
Mincha's on time, we usually do.
Yeah.
If Mincha's late, then sometimes you end up,
It could be challenging now if you're reading Parkei Avot.
right, especially if Mincha starts late, then it could be challenging sometimes to,
We check, but normally we could do Shalosh Seudos.
Yeah.
Eating.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we wait 10 minutes or something, we do Marav.
Yeah.
We wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever. it
make
is.
Havdalah and then eat again.
We do Abdallah.
That's it.
Right? And then we can have a FARBRENGEN after that.
No problem. Yeah. The only other option is if you started the FARBRENGEN early enough and then you keep on going. Okay. In the winter, it's not so out of the ordinary to do that.
It's just so easy to get into a FARBRENGEN after the Shalosh Seudos.
Yeah.
If somebody
You have to
needs
make sure that you started eating before. Okay. So now these are the principles. Let's learn one more halacha and then we'll continue on Monday. If people were sitting and eating before the day started. Okay, so which means they began permissibly. They started before Ben Hashmashas. According to all opinions, they started early enough. Now, after their meal is done, kavu, they decided to like sit down in like this permanent fashion, lishtia, to drink. So like it says in footnote 16, i.e., after completing their meal, they continue sitting at the table, sharing wine or other similar beverages. Sorry? Let's say let's say they had wine in that, let's say they had wine in their meal, but they stopped eating. So let's say you washed, let's say you washed, right? And you sat down and you had some challah, this is toward the end of Shabbos, before Ben Hashmashas. You washed, you had some challah, you ate something, and during the meal you're drinking wine. Okay, and you're enjoying yourself. The FARBRENGEN is going well, so you keep on drinking wine, but you stop eating. You're not eating any more bread. It's just you ran out. But you're still whatever it's mashke. You're still drinking, but it's actually mashke would count because it's a significant drink that you would sit down and enjoy, right? So the meal is done, but like you latched onto your meal, this drinking meal that keeps on going.
It said before you can, even if you stop eating.
Correct. So you don't have to stop when night comes. Exactly. Because it's all considered one big meal. Because so long as you didn't do the benching, you didn't do Birkat Hamazon, which is not uncommon. You finish eating and you keep on sitting around and drinking.
I think this is a distinction.
So you can
between
keep on going.
Shabbos and weekday, right? If you were to do this during the weekday, those additional glasses of wine would constitute a separate meal.
Only if you weren't
drop-off.
expecting them,
Only if you weren't expecting.
which would imply here too.
But it's funny. Here,
You knew the wine's there. You have a bottle of wine sitting on the table. And you keep on drinking even though you finished eating, which is not uncommon. It's very normal. Before dessert, you have a few glasses of wine, whatever. It's a good company and you're sitting around and it's good FARBRENGEN. It's not uncommon. The author was telling you that because it's been an extension of your meal, even though you stopped eating, so long as you haven't benched yet, you can keep on going into the nighttime. So long as you started that meal while it was permitted, which is before Ben Hashmashas. Yeah.
it's funny for the Shabbat Kiddush, a lot of it, a big part of it was intention. And here it's like it's all
So again, say it again.
for like Shabbat Kiddush, everything had to do with like intention. Like when you did your Kiddush, did you have the intention to eat here? Or to eat
Yes.
there, or to
Yeah.
eat there, or to continue your meal, or
Yeah.
to pause your meal,
Yeah.
or to come back to your meal.
Here it's a bit different. Yeah.
Here it's like facts. It's like this
Yeah.
is the law. this
I
is
think
your
the
intention of
difference
day.
would be when it comes to Kiddush, you're starting out with Kiddush and you're trying to latch your meal onto your Kiddush. Here it's a meal began. Right? You're starting with a meal rather than starting with a Kiddush. You're ending with Havdalah rather than with Kiddush, where maybe that's the difference. Okay, now here's an interesting halacha. Va'afilu amru, second paragraph of halacha 3 of Gimel. Va'afilu amru, even if they said, these people sitting around the table, they finished their meal, they're still drinking some wine or whatever, something like that. Va'afilu amru zelaza, even if each said to the other, Bo v'navdil, okay, let's make Havdalah already. They didn't say let's bench. They said let's make Havdalah.
Let's make up.
If they said, let's bench, now we're getting into dicey territory. Is the meal over? Is the meal not over? Because they declared their decision to stop eating or drinking. But here they didn't say that. Here they said, Lifnei Kavdala. But then they said, you know what, forget about it. Let's keep the FARBRENGEN going. It's going well. Let's keep on eating. Let's keep on drinking. Says Alter Rebbe, they may continue eating and drinking because they didn't break their meal by saying, let's make Havdalah. Right? They don't have to stop just because they decided at one point, let's make Havdalah, and then retracted that decision. Right? And they don't even have to make a new hagafen on the drink that they decided to keep on drinking after they said, let's make Havdalah.
It's well into nightfall already.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they started eating Banish Moshes. They started eating before Banish Moshes. I'm sorry. No problem. They're eating or drinking. Let's say the eating stops and they keep on drinking. And they're sitting around and they look at the clock. Oh my gosh, Shabbos has been out for an hour already. Let's make Havdalah. And then someone else says, let's drink another 10 more minutes. I want to share something. So it says the Alter Rebbe, they can keep on eating and drinking and they don't even have to make a new bracha. Because they didn't end their meal by saying, I want to make Havdalah. And therefore, they don't have to make a new bracha hagafen on the wine they keep on drinking. Right? They didn't take their minds off of eating and drinking completely. Because they didn't say, hey, let's bench. They said, hey, let's make Havdalah. If they said, hey, let's bench, different story.
Right.
You just declared ending of your meal. You may have to make a new bracha hagafen, and maybe you shouldn't even be drinking at all because you said your meal's over. But they didn't say their meal's over here. They just said, let's make Havdalah. And therefore, if they keep on eating or drinking, no need to make a new bracha.
It's funny how, normally when Kiddush arrives, we learn that you have to stop your meal, cover your bread. And
That was the beginning of...
But here at Havdalah, there's no rush to stop what you're doing to make Havdalah.
That was the...
And I think it's because of the covet of Shabbos.
That's correct. When it comes to Shabbos starting, Shabbos says, I'm here. You got to stop what you're doing. Shabbos is here.
Rush out of Shabbos.
Weekday doesn't say that.
Right.
That was the beginning of our Gemara. Shabbos, as soon as Shabbos comes, Shabbos says, I'm here. I'm turning all your meals into a Shabbos meal. Stop what you're doing. Make Kiddush. Shabbos going out, weekday doesn't come and say, I'm here. I impose myself on Shabbos.
Because it's a lower sanctity.
Correct.
It's
It's not sanctified at all. It's a weekday.
Right.
So weekday doesn't impose itself on you. You have to decide to end it.
Yeah, and it's almost
Because
like they're
normally with a
making,
mitzvah, like something
That's right.
time bound.
That's correct.
it's almost like they're making it that as easy as possible to just keep the Shabbat going.
Exactly.
Like that Shekhinah
Exactly.
is here,
So
and
that's right.
it's
So
fine, just don't-
that's the
just
point.
keep going.
Like you were saying before, it's two principles here. One principle is you want to make Shabbos keep on going. The other principle is when you have an obligation of Havdalah, you have to make Havdalah. Sorry? These people, they'll do Ma'ariv after they've done their meal.
3 in the morning, they do more.
Theoretically, yeah. They should do it before midnight, at least before midnight, certainly.
We're strict.
Depends on the time of the year.
We're strict to that. We stop.
We're strict here because people get antsy, not because of any halacha consideration. We're strict to have Ma'ariv on time because people get antsy. Not because there's any halachic obligation to do quick Ma'ariv. It's because people get antsy. That's as simple as that. As soon as Shabbos is over.
Have a big group of people, you want to keep it somewhat
Yeah.
organized, and
If you ever suffered from the issue of smoking, you know what this is. When you're on a plane and you're not allowed to smoke on a plane, you don't have the urge for it because you can't. The second that plane lands, you're anxious. Get everybody off the plane. I need to get my cigarette, right? So it's like Shabbos is over, everybody gets all anxious.
Fine.
During Shabbos, okay, Shabbos, your mind is in Shabbos mode, you cut everything out. The second Shabbos is over, everybody gets all, but not for halachic consideration.
And it's the same thing when Shabbos is over in the winter at 5 o'clock. They're still like, I need it now.
Exactly.
And then in the summer they can go till 9
But still,
o'clock.
exactly.
And then
It's a thing in the brain.
It's not also cottage though.
No. Okay, so yeah. So now he says, but the fact that they sat around and one said, let's make Havdalah, that doesn't end their meal. They can keep on drinking without a bracha afterwards. Until they actually make Havdalah as per the decision to make Havdalah. Because they may retract their decision and keep on drinking before they make Havdalah. Okay. Okay, we'll continue on God willing on Monday. More details about like the principles we laid out already. Now apply them to new scenarios. Here we applied it to a scenario where they decided they want to continue. They said, hey, let's make Havdalah, but they decided not to. Other scenarios where a person stops to make Havdalah, other scenarios in which there are meals and the way in which a person treats them and how he breaks them up will determine whether he may continue eating or not continue eating or drinking, and that we'll discuss, God willing, on Monday. It goes till I think it goes to Halacha Ches, so Dal Hey Vav Zayin, and Ches, I believe, Ches already begins this issue of if someone forgot to make Havdalah at night, can you make Havdalah on Sunday? Can you make Havdalah on Monday? So we're going to pause when we get there, go back to the Gemara, which discusses it, and then come back to the Shulchan Aruch to finish this chapter in Shulchan Aruch.
So there's no strict halacha anyway.
Sorry?
There's no strict halacha.
About what?
This is what you gotta do, this is what you gotta do, this is what you do.
Well, it's scenario based, right?
You continue your meal, you're ready.
So again, I think he's right that it comes down to this conflict of principles. You have one principle when it comes to Shabbos starting. It's very clear. Shabbos starts, you can't do anything until you make it finish done. When it comes to Shabbos ending, we have two principles. We have the principle one, which says, hey, make Shabbos go as long as you can. Other principle is 1 second, you have an obligation for Havdalah. How could you do something else until you do Havdalah? So it's balancing, it's finding when and where you apply which of these standards that makes these halachas circumstantially subjective.
Conditional.
It's conditional to the circumstances, considering you have these different principles.
Is there also, I heard, they say one Shabbat a year to do 36 hours? Or no, is that just something else?
I once heard of such a thing. Yeah. Okay. Have a wonderful day, Eden.
Thank you.